the outside persons who are not inside those rooms, it may appear that we are not leveraging the need for our public to get back into their homes. It may appear to them that their houses and their neighborhoods are safe, and they cannot see any good reason that they can't come back home. I understand that frustration. I understand their desire for their life to turn back to normal when it has been turned upside down, and there is no visible reason to them for the decisions that we're making. I'm going to address that today and talk to you about what, as a community, you should expect going into the future. As I have stated in the past, and we'll take the time to restate today, these zones where the active fire is are still very active. We have had fire growth in some cases over the last couple days. We have had fires pop up today in the Indian Trail area where firefighters have had to stop what they're doing and go and address new blazes. We have had new fires started yesterday. And those are the kinds of things with the conditions on the ground inside the immediate affected areas that our firefighters are addressing today. I would like to point out to the public that those firefighters who are in those zones, cooling down those hot spots, they are wearing full self-contained breathing apparatuses because of the hazardous materials that are airborne, hazardous materials that are introduced into the air when people go through those areas, things that are very, very toxic and very, very dangerous to humans. People automatically assume that just because they can't see a fire, that there is no danger to them. And while the immediate danger to their life might not be obvious, when they are inhaling these kinds of toxic fumes and substances that are airborne, it might not be fatal immediately, but it can cause serious health risks and death years later down the road. Our firefighting friends who historically have been exposed to those kinds of things can tell that story all too well. I want our public to understand that those burn areas are absolutely not safe for people to be in. I will tell you, we have people going into those, not protected in any way, shape, or form, and the decision for us to let the public into those areas will be when we are confident that there is no risk to their life immediately or into the future. And I will set an expectation right now, going forward, for us to get those burned and immediately affected areas safe for people to come in is going to be weeks. I apologize to people whose homes maybe weren't burned but were in an immediately affected area. Their homes will not be safe for them to habitate, even though they appear untouched. It is going to be weeks before we can safely let you in. That is disappointing news, probably angering news, but the preservation of life is in our foremost thoughts and at the front of every decision we make when we talk about these evacuation zones. Yes, it's important that people are inconvenienced, but we are focused on not losing any lives or as few lives as possible with this instance. And we talk about the fact that so far we don't know of anyone who's lost their life here. When we talk about reducing evacuation zones and letting people back into their areas, one of the foremost considerations is we don't want to create a situation where we are risking people's lives unnecessarily. I'm here to announce that there will be some shifts, some minor shifts to our evacuation zones today. Some level 3 areas will be reduced to level 2. It is not a large area. The weather conditions and the fire danger are high enough now, and as our fire danger increases with the weather system moving in over the next 3 days, has not produced a scenario where our firefighters feel comfortable letting people back into some of those unaffected level 3 evacuation zones. They have not been able to tell me with any amount of certainty that they can prevent a fire that starts up in a wind-driven condition, that we could evacuate some of those untouched areas in a manner that is going to produce no potential fatalities or injuries. we have been very, very lucky with the scope of this last fire and with how quickly it moved that we don't have any major injuries and we don't have any known fatalities. I am not in the business, and our firefighters are not in the business of introducing people into an area where we won't be able to say that anymore. And if people want to be angry about it, they can get a hold of me. That's fine. But our business, first and foremost, is to keep people safe. So I will say, with the updating of these zones, that with the weather event coming in and the not complete establishment of containment lines, there will likely not be any changes to the evacuation zones until the weekend is over and this weather event has passed us by. Now, I will say, if the weather changes and the forecast changes, we can pivot and try to get people back into their homes as quick as possible. What I really hope is that we don't have to change evacuation zones because new fires started and they were driven and they moved and we have to create bigger zones. I need our public to be patient. I need them to be cordial with our law enforcement and our National Guard people who are at our access points. Unfortunately, we've had some frustrated citizens not treat our guardsmen and women very well at all. And I have very little tolerance for that. These guards people are members of our community. They have had their lives disrupted. Some of them have had their homes destroyed. Some of them have had to be evacuated out of their homes, and they are here serving our community. Please, please be compliant with them. Please treat them with respect. I will tell people again, in the areas that were effectively actually damaged and affected by these fires, it is not safe for people to be in there. Our firefighters in those damaged areas at night use aerial drone surveillance to detect hotspots. And I will tell you, there is enough human activity, people who are in those areas against the level 3 evacuation orders, that last night they could not fly those missions because there is too much human activity producing hotspots. If you are in those areas, leave. You are preventing our firefighters from doing as good a job as they can do. Get out of there. It's not safe, not only to yourself, but it is preventing our firefighters from working as well. I want to make sure the expectations are clear. I want to make sure our public knows that these areas are not safe and we are not using arbitrary information to make these decisions. I will say, from my perspective, I understand the inconvenience, but protecting people from harm is my utmost concern. And when we know we can keep people protected, that is when we will change zones. And I'll close with this to give perspective. For people whose homes haven't been damaged and they feel like their homes were miles away from these fire lines, in about 8 to 10 hours on Saturday in a wind-driven fire event, there were 2,500 homes exposed to this fire. A full 1/3 of the structures were destroyed. All right? 33 to 40% of those homes were destroyed in that amount of time. You can imagine why we're a little skeptical about being able to safely let people back into their homes when we know a weather event and a fire event, which could take place at any time, could go ripping through those neighborhoods, and we could lose lives. We could lose even more property. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So please, I ask for your trust. I ask for your grace for our firefighters, for our law enforcement officers, for our National Guard. I know you're frustrated, but please, please, please work with us and help us get through this as quick as possible. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are there any concerns with this weekend and the weather and everything and those little pockets of fire that are still happening? Any concerns that will make those areas worse, or that
Yes.
make the fires worse?
Yeah. The short answer is yes. I was talking to the incident commander for the IMT team this morning, and the conditions are such right now in Spokane that he said there was a 100% chance that a spark from anything will start a fire. That's pretty straightforward.
We're planning on a fire then.
Yeah, we think the likelihood is very, very high that it's going to start and could restart inside all of these hotspots.
Yeah, I'm curious too, does your office have any concerns about, I know that we just reported that who started the fire planned it based on weather events and everything and based on the red flag warnings. Any concerns that, might do the same thing this weekend?
Yeah, as much as it pains me to think that somebody would be that reckless with human life and property, of course we're concerned about that. Of course we're concerned about it. And I would warn them that, the citizens, I hope, are on the lookout. And I would say to our citizens, during these high fire probability events, pay attention to what people are doing and don't hesitate to let law enforcement know.
We're hearing stories of people walking in miles to their place and then walking back out with whatever they can carry, and they're not being stopped. And I find that to be less safe than driving in there with a vehicle being able to get out.
Well, I mean, the reality is they're not driving in because it's difficult to get past the checkpoints. We only have so much manpower, and we only have so much ability to control access into these large burn areas. I want people to understand that, number one, they're putting themselves at risk. They're preventing firefighters from doing all of the things they need to do to make this place safe. And we don't know they're in there, and we can't evacuate them when things go bad, and they won't know. I just ask that they stop doing it.
You talked about the patience, to have for you guys as we wait on the evacuation orders. What is it like for, the staffing for those people who have to answer the questions, who are approaching the checkpoints and they're making their plea or whatever it may be? How do you all handle that as well? Just because of, I imagine it's a lot of stress.
There is quite a bit of stress. Thank goodness that we had access to our National Guard because, while all this is going on and we have to focus so many resources on this disaster, we have the rest of the county to deal with 911 calls and all of the other things we do on a normal day. So, thank goodness that we have the National Guard here and uniquely positioned to do the tasks that we give them. Every day, our request for the number of guardsmen and women that we're asking for is going up. That footprint is increasing, and for the most part, if you had to guess it percentage-wise, a lot of our citizens are very, very polite. But the number of people who have been impolite, straight up ignore our people, is increasing, and I just can't fathom being disrespectful to people who are volunteering to be here and doing things that are outside their normal jobs and duties when they're just here to keep you safe.
Could somebody crossing one of those lines be arrested?
Yes. You could be arrested for obstructing a law enforcement officer because it is a lawful order for us to keep people out. And of course, there is a million different situations where people were in legitimately and didn't evacuate and then leave, where we're not going to go ahead and charge them for not leaving initially. But I would like us to get to a point in this community where we can avoid having to actually arrest people. Doesn't mean we won't.
Are there any certain neighborhoods or communities where it's a bigger problem than another?
Well, some of the bigger parts of our level 3 evacuation zone that aren't necessarily close to the actual fire lines, like the north side of the Indian Trail area, things like that. I understand how citizens might be looking at that and say, I'm fine being here. And the reality of it is with this wind event and how we expect a fire might behave if the unthinkable happens, it's going to come right at them. And that's where we have to weigh, if that happens and it's going to move quick, can we evacuate this heavily populated, densely populated place in amount of time to avoid the loss of life? And right now, and their fire lines up there are not established enough where they can guarantee the fire wouldn't cross those lines. The answer is no. We don't think we could evacuate that without a loss of life or serious injury. So that's why we're leaving it where it's at. All right. Appreciate you all coming. Thank you.